Hello, and welcome back, most illustrious members of the Detail. I'm your host, D, also known as MTF Doom, and today we're going to talk about 6 decks that I'm going to recommend you based on what you play in Magic the Gathering, and to a lesser extent Hearthstone and Pokemon, but I don't know those games as well, so I'm just putting Magic the Gathering in the title. Don't get mad at me. I hope you enjoy! Just before we get started, as always, the call to action. You did well on yesterday's call to action. Let's shoot for 225 subscribers today. That's what I asked for yesterday. We didn't quite get there, but we got close. A couple more. If you enjoy this content, that's the best way to let me know. Follow-ups, which are also free. Did I mention subscribing is free? Follow-ups that are also free are stuff like leaving a comment and joining the Discord so that you too can recommend videos like this. This one came from Discord. It's not a recommendation by any one particular person. It's just a conversation that we got into about what decks feel like what other decks from the overlap between the two games, because there's obviously a lot of differences, but there's a lot of similarities, or at least there's similarities in the qualia of the deck. I find certain decks really, really fun in both games, and I think it's because of the types of things. All right, we're just going to get into it. It's very self-explanatory. I'm making it overly complicated, as I'm wont to do. Let's just get into it. So, one of my personal favorites from Magic is Jund. If you don't know, Jund just refers to red, black, green. But in general, what it means, what it signifies, is a mid-range deck. If you don't know what that means, it just means like cards that are good. Cards that are kind of just good on their own in a lot of ways, with some synergy and some card draw, and you're just kind of trying to play fair Magic and win on the back of that. And so a deck like this, that, it's just like you're playing, Maximus on turn 6, and he only costs 2 because of Sarah, and you're just like, that's 7 stats. Here's 5 more. Bishop might be a 3/7 as well. Who knows by the end of the game. Lizard, that's a 2/5. If you pull something out of the Lizard with Polaris, because they thought they filled up against Lizard, but actually you Polaris one of their cards out, just a regular old 2/5. Just the 2/5 that you play all the time. Angela, 2/6, because, that's just the stat line that it is. This is just good cards. These are all good cards. Shang-Chi is currently probably the best piece of reactive interaction you could pack right now. I think Cosmo might be just as good, but requires more forethought. And I don't play Jund like that. I play Jund to not think, to just play fair Magic. And usually it's good enough, because your opponent's trying to do all kinds of like sneaky stuff and like, and if I go here and do this and do that, and you're like, if I put a total of 85 points of power on the board, does my opponent ever win? Sometimes, but sometimes not. And that's what a deck like this wants to do. It wants to interact in relevant ways with like Iceman and Shang, but mostly it just wants to be able to do like big, beefy plays that are solid on their own, that don't need a lot of internal synergy, and that can just win games by being a lot of stats, but not really by being tricksy. Decks like this are a ton of fun for me. This is something like a mid-range strategy as far as we'd have it here. And yeah, if you play Jund, I cannot recommend a list like this high enough. Something like I don't know. It gets called Sarah Control in this game, but like, yeah, it's very Jund-like. Okay. Moving on. Stacks. If you're a terrible, horrible player who played Stacks, so if you don't know, if you're only here for the Snap content, Stacks is a reference to a card called Smokestack, which says, what is it, like, on your upkeep, put a counter on this card and then sacrifice a permanent for each counter on it. And then, or at each player's upkeep, they have to do that. Something like that. And so you start and your upkeep has already passed because your upkeep is basically at the start of your turn. And so now like the next player goes and like they have to sack something and then it gets to you and you have to sack one thing, but then you put a counter on it and then everyone else has to stack two things. And then it gets back to you. Now you finally have to sack two and then you put a counter on it. Now they have to sack three things, right? So you're just always like a little bit ahead. You're limiting what your opponent can do. And in that vein, we're playing Sandman. It's a Sandman ramp deck. There is no such thing as a true ramp in this game because this game is smart and knows that ramp would be too good. So the only things that are tied to ramp are either temporary. So wave lets you do like one big thing next turn, but it's unilateral. Both players can take advantage. And electro gives you that extra energy, but you can only play one card a turn. And so what you're trying to do is leverage that into a Sandman play. So now both players can only play one card a turn. You're both limited to that same drawback, but your card quality is notably higher than your opponent on average. That's the idea of it. And so by leveraging that stacks effect of only one card each turn, each player, you can take advantage and end up winning the game. That's it. It plays like a stacks deck. It feels like playing stacks. There's no other way to get around it. I don't really like this play style, but I appreciate that it exists. Talking about what we talked about yesterday, while I like that Sandman. All right, so Sandman used to be a 4/1, and when Sandman was a 4/1, he saw basically no play. Now he's a 5/5 and he sees some play, because ramping into him suddenly isn't like a huge tempo loss, and the 5 stats or something. I don't know. He is a necessary piece, and I think he's at a good power level right now. And I appreciate that he doesn't have any more power, or he doesn't cost any less energy, right? I think he had to be a 1 power when he was only a 4 cost, because locking your opponent out earlier is worse, right? I think everyone kind of understands what I'm getting at. Like, the earlier you lock your opponent to 1 play a turn, the harder it is to overcome that because of the card quality disparity in your decks. And so I think this is a better situation for him to be in, and unfortunately I think he is necessary for the health of the game, but I don't like him. I don't like this card, and I don't like this deck. But if you're a stacks player, I want to offer it to you as an option so that you might try this stupid game, because you can play your stupid stacks deck. All right, moving on. We've got Death and Taxes. This one is a little... So Death and Taxes in Magic is a deck that taxes your opponent's resources. So it's kind of a control deck, but a lot of the times it'll do stuff like land destruction. There's like, I actually don't even know if Death and Taxes are like hate bears. This could be kind of hate bears as well. They're not really relevant in the current meta, at least for Modern, but they are really cool decks. And like, honestly, I really like this deck in particular, and I really wish that Magic had decks like this. I really, like, this deck is so cool to me. And so it, in Magic, it wants to leverage effects that are like, well, your opponent can't search their library, or your opponent can't, like, it costs them extra to cast spells. They can't cast certain spells. And you want to leverage all that in ways that forces them out of resources. And here it's more that, because in Snap, if you're watching this as a Magic player, Snap, you're only allowed 4 cards per location. And so a deck like this is trying to clog up all of those locations. It's functionally, every time you add a rock to your opponent's side, you've kind of destroyed one of their lands. You've kind of destroyed half of their land, like half of one land, because I feel like most players won't usually use all 4 slots. But like, every rock that you add to their side, or every time you put a green goblin, or if you kick something over there with Viper, you've kind of denied them resources. Same Black Widow, you deny them a draw, and then you destroy your own effects with Deathlock and Carnage. So you free up your side of these rocks and the kind of bad Black Widow body left over and the hood, so that you only have the 1/6. You don't even have the 1-2. And you free up your own side, and you've put all this garbage over there, so then you hazmat, and they have more stuff than you, or you have Luke Cage, so it doesn't affect you. And ultimately, it's just all really, really cool. It's really neat. It's as close to stacks as we have, though the systems are different enough that there won't really ever, or not stacks, sorry, Death and Taxes, that there won't ever really be a D&T deck in Snap, but this is very close. And Death and Taxes is one of my favorite, again, because it kind of is trying to force an opponent to play fair. It's kind of like you sit down, you're like, all right, now none of those nasty combos. We're just swinging at each other with creatures like the good Lord Richard Garfield intended. All right, so super cool deck. Cannot recommend it enough. All right, next up. Blue-white control. If you don't know, in Magic, blue is a U because black also exists, and black is the better color, so it got the first dibs on B as its signifier. So there's Wooburg, and U is blue. So this is blue-white control. Basically, blue-white control is a very reactive control style. Something that has black is going to be... or blue-white control reacts to your opponent actually casting spells. The only thing that does that in this game, realistically, is Daredevil, and I guess Kang, but I don't have Kang, and I don't recommend you buy Kang. So Daredevil lets you see what your opponent is doing on 5, and it's the only way to literally counter what your opponent is doing, right? And we have ways of doing that with Professor X and Gamora. So both of these are really strong turn 5 plays that can just mean your opponent can't win a lane. And that's ideal for us. And other than that, it's just control pieces. It's Iceman, Scorpion, Cosmo, Shang are all control pieces. Storm is a control piece. And then you're going to lock your opponent out of a lane that you're ahead of on 5, or you're going to put down a 12 power on 5 based on what they play. If you storm a lane, you can later add a Doombot to it. It's all really cool. It's really it's very blue-white. It's very control. It's a lot of, you got Sunspot, so there's turns you're just going to sit back, wait for your opponent to do something. Sometimes you're going to win on the back of literally just like Sunspot, Lizard, wait, turn 6 Shang-Chi. It's just like Sunspot won you a lane. Lizard put enough meat in another lane that they had to fight over it, and then Shang-Chi just beat their 6-drop, and you win. It's just like, it's very funny how little it takes to win with this deck on certain hands. So yeah, this is... Daredevil is a really good card. Daredevil's a very solid pickup in Pool 3. It's not a very good card, but it enables decks like this, and these decks are like very cool. And if it's your type of thing, if you really like blue base control decks, basically any Daredevil deck, don't play Galactus, you're a monster. But other than that, great pickups, great style of deck for scratching that blue-white control itch. Footfalls. If you don't know Footfalls, it is... how do I describe it? Footfalls is a 0-cost spell in Magic the Gathering that puts 2 4/4s on the battlefield. If it sounds broken, it's because it is. But it's because cards that cost... well, I say it's 0. There's... oh god, we're going to get into the weeds here. There's a difference between cards in Magic. There's a difference between cards that cost 0, meaning they have a little 0 in the upper right-hand corner, and cards which do not have a cost, meaning they have no mana cost up in the top right. And the difference is that a 0 costs 0 and you may cast it. A thing that does not have a cost in the top right costs 0. It has 0 mana value, but you cannot cast it because it doesn't have a way for you to cast it, because you cannot pay a non-existent cost, right? And so Footfalls has nothing in the top right corner. So what it does is it lets you pay 1 mana, and then 4 turns later it'll cast itself through the in-game mechanics attached to it. So you have to wait 4 turns, and then you get 2 4/4s. But what you're really trying to do is play cards that say, cast the next spell in your deck for free, and you can cast it off effects like that. And so that's a Lockjaw deck as far as I'm concerned. Lockjaw is when you play a card here, swap it with a random card in your deck. Well, look, Infinite, you can't really cast this card. If you played a card last turn, you can't play this. But if you have Lockjaw, that effect isn't active. If you pull this out of your deck, it will play itself, even though it says it can't. Other than that, you're just trying to put cards in to Lockjaw that costs nothing. Either Wasp, Sunspot is a decent... Sunspot's good because it's a good card to put into Lockjaw, because on average you'll get something much bigger. But also, it's not the worst thing to get out of Lockjaw, because there's going to be times where you're just floating mana anyway. And so it's like a 1/4, a 1/5 on some occasions, and you're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's all I really needed out of that lane. And then Nightcrawler is good, again, to put in because it costs 1, and on average you'll get more out of it. And it's good because if you roll into it, if you put Wasp in and you get Nightcrawler out, you can move Nightcrawler and try again. So that's always good. Thor creates a 0 cost that you can shuffle back in to the Lockjaw lane to give Thor +6. Leech is good if you hit it early because it removes your abilities from your opponent's hand, and it's good to put in late because it can turn into any of these other cards that are way better. And then everything else is just good cards. They're just solid. You can replace... I like Vision a lot for the ability to move. I like Chavez for the consistency. I think Infinite might be the card I'd most keen to replace, but it was also the one closest to Footfalls, so I didn't replace it because I wanted this to make sense. But yeah, also I know Footfalls is like very popular right now, so this is the deck. This is the deck. It's also the one that got me to Infinite last month, so it's also a solid choice. All right, moving on. One more Yawgmoth combo. So there is no true Infinite combo. There's combos that are more infinite than this. The like Wong, Zola, Venom, something like that. It might also be Mystique, I forget. But the point is, there are combos that are technically larger than this, but this is as close to infinite as you ever need to go for as far as infinite combos go. If you play Wong, your on reveals happen twice. Mystique copies Wong's, now your on reveals happen twice and then twice. And then you play Ironheart. It gives like, what is it? It's 6 power, 12. Is it 24 or is it 48? I forget. But it's a ton of power. Like, it's a 3, like 28 or 24 or 40. I don't know. It's a ton of power. And you can also do something else. You could do like Wolfsbane. You could do like White Tiger just fills your whole everything. It fills all the lanes with 5/7s. Like, it's just a ton of power. It's a ton of power everywhere. You can like on 4 go Wong, on 5 go Ironheart, on 6 go Absorbing Man and something else. Just, you could do so much, and you can add sort of functional infinite power to like a bunch of lanes. If you get the Mjolnir, you can get it to trigger twice, so you have a bunch of power in one lane. And then like Wolfsbane, there's a lot of different plays. It's also just like reasonable cards on their own, which is what Yawgmoth combo is in Magic. I guess I didn't say that. Yawgmoth combo is not an all-in combo deck where if you don't hit it, you lose. It's much more of a grindy mid-range strategy that has a combo finish. And so like if you don't hit Wong and Mystique and Absorbing Man, and you don't have like the Wombo combo, these are all reasonable cards. Like Iceman, Scorpion, Lizard, reasonable. Thor, White Tiger, Doom, Chavez, all just good mid-range cards on their own. Ironheart needs a very little bit of setup. Like, you need 3 other cards for this to be worth it. But that's not like that hard. It's just not a tempo play. You can't play it on 3 in this deck because you'll never have 3 other cards by 3, barring location stuff. Wolfsbane needs some setup. And then we obviously covered like Wong, Absorbing Man, Mystique are all cards that like are synergistic. But even if you don't set up that engine, you have very reasonable plays all throughout the game, a very reasonable game plan. And then sometimes you get the absolute wombo combo of like Wong, Mystique, and something, and you're just like, okay, let's go to town. Let's absolutely just wreck this game. So that's it. That's it. I think I might do this again. This was really fun trying to come up with these. We had some ideas for what burn might look like and aggro. There's obviously like a zoo deck. I just didn't really have time to put them together. I've been really busy with work, but I really love doing this, so I really do want to keep doing one every day or as close as possible. Thank you so much for watching. If you find my content elucidating, enlightening, or enriching, do the stuff that I asked you to do at the beginning, or you just, leave a like, leave a nice comment. I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you all tomorrow.